Hi, so we're group 8. So for today, we're going to discuss hazardous waste in terms of technology treatment. So we're going to classify three different treatment technology. This will be biological, chemical, and land disposal. So firstly, we're going to discuss about biological treatments. So there are actually five treatment ways that biological treatment can be applied. So firstly, it will be the aerobic and anaerobic system. And second, bioreactor. Third, constructed wetlands. Fourth, soil bioremediation. And lastly, biofilters. So for the first one, it will be the aerobic and anaerobic system. So before to get into the main types of aerobic bacteria, let me introduce to you what is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic system. So for aerobic system, it requires energy for survival purposes. Um, on the other hand, aerobic system doesn't need any oxygen to function and it can function well just like the aerobic system. So for the main types of aerobic bacteria, um, the first one will be the obligate aerobes. They are compulsorily required oxygen for deriving energy, growth, reproduction, and cellular respiration. These organisms do not survive in the absence of oxygens or flooding. For the second types will be the facultative or microaerophile aerobes. So for this, it behaves both aerobically and anaerobically. It depends on the condition. So for the first condition, according to the prevailing condition, in reduced environment, they acquire energy via anaerobic pathway. So for the second condition, whereas in oxidative environment, they develop aerobic pathway. The microaerophilic bacteria requires oxygen but in very low concentration. So in general, aerobic system always need oxygen to function or do their work. And while for anaerobic system, it doesn't need any oxygen, but it can do the function of what aerobic can do. So that's their main difference. Um, so to get further into the details of what aerobic and anaerobic can do to biological treatment, so it actually can be broadly classified into two categories, depending on the level of oxygen present in oil or supplied to the waste in the digestion vessels. So the first one, high oxygen concentration, minimum requirement of 0.5 ppm free dissolved oxygen. So actually promote the growth of aerobic bacteria, biological reaction proceeding via oxidation. So in this element, um, there are some elements like sulfur, nitrogen, and phosphorus containing compounds in the wastewater are converted into low energy or the end products such as sulfates, nitrates, and phosphates. So the energy necessary for respiration and for the synthesis of new cells is also generated by oxidation of carbonaceous cellular materials. And when in the absence of oxygen, anaerobic bacteria thrive. So the end product of degradation are decomposed liquor that normally requires further treatment prior to discharge, and a gas comprising mainly of methane and carbon dioxide. So as we can see, the main difference between those two is that in an oxygen base, it promotes growth directly and do the reaction proceeding via oxidation. And while in the absence of oxygen, just like anaerobic system, it actually required further treatment or further work in order to do the same thing or sort the same work just like aerobic system. So for the second biological treatment will be the bioreactor. So for bioreactor, it is a manufacturer device where a biological reaction is carried out. So it's very um, well known or being used widely in the industry. So also it is a closed system used for bioprocessing that supports the growth of cells or tissue. The process can be aerobic and anaerobic. So in bioreactor, it's still being used in aerobic and anaerobic system. So it is supported that an inner loop oxide dynamic membranes bioreactor could effectively treat high strength pyridine. So why it makes so special, why bioreactor was being made so special, because can't treat highly strength pyridine. So what makes pyridine very special? So for these slides, so to give background about pyridine, basic natural pyridine, it is used as a solvent and to make many different products such as medicine, vitamins, food flour, food flouring, pesticides, paints, dyes, rubber products, adhesives, and waterproofing for fabric. So as we can see, pyridines are being used in our daily life. So it's actually one of the important things that we need, and it is essentials for us. So what's the process of this bioreactor? So in the process, aluminum ion released from pyridine to biodegradation could be effectively liquefied to nitrate in the oxide zone, which was then recirculated into the anoxic zone to serve as electron acceptor for pyridine biodegradation. So for this process, actually, what Miss discussed in her first lecture about the nitrogen cycle. This is actually just the nitrogen cycle, but we added some other elements. So, based on my research, through the integration of both photodegradation and biodegradation processes, and achieved 90% of removal efficiency under several phenol concentrations. So, in bioreactor, it was very widely used in all industry or homes. It is because that it has proven that at least 90% of removal are efficiency under this method. So, thirdly, one of the important of biological treatment will be the constructed wetlands. So what is constructed wetlands? These are the designed and built similar to natural wetlands to treat wastewater. So they consist of a shallow depression in the ground with a level bottom. So the flow is controlled in constructed wetlands, so the water is spread evenly among the wetland plants. In natural wetland, 90% of the water may flow through small canals. Controlling the flow allows natural processes to occur and clean wastewater more efficiently. To further discuss, so what really makes wetland very important? So based from one of the research of Wang research, it was stated that a lagoon and plus subsurface filtration method can treat pharmaceuticals, and it was found out that lagoon could remove most of this. So it means that lagoon or the wetlands, constructions of the wetlands can help us reduce those disease or waste that we don't want to have in our daily life or our environment. So creating such things can help us reduce all the bad elements that we would like to eliminate in our life. So another reason is that the construction of wetlands provide simple and effective wastewater treatment. So they can be used to treat domestic, agricultural, industrial, and mining wastewaters. Their construction costs are much less, 50 to 90% than conventional systems, and their operating costs are very low. Constructed wetlands are also pleasant to look at, attractive desired wildlife, and provide environmental educational opportunities. So for this, actually, you can think that just like the bioreactors, it can be created in industrial, agriculture, any places, and it costs less. And with that, it helps us a lot. Like it helps us to reduce all the possible waste, just the pharmaceuticals. So for the fourth one, this is actually one or maybe for me the first most important one in biological treatment. So this will be the soil bioremediation. So what is it? It's defined as the biological process to degrade, break down, transform, and or essentially remove contaminant soils or groundwater. It can also impairment of qualities from soil and water. So it is use of microbes to clean up contaminated soils and groundwater. Microbes are very small organisms, such as bacteria, that live naturally in the environment. It is also natural process in which relies on bacteria, fungi, plants, and to alter contaminants as these organisms carry out their normal life function. So this is actually one of our lessons in the first module, parang ganyan producers. And it is importance of producers is, so first pa lang, kailangan ng mga element na to to regulate and do their things like growing plants, then kakainin ng first predators, mga ganun, tapos magiging tayo. So what really important about this is that it benefits directly to us. So kung hindi siya ganun ka nagawang well, it won't let us have those things na makakabuti sa atin. So the effect of soil condition on rate of biodegradation of hydrocarbons is addressed. Further, limitation and potential of both EXC2 and in situ bioremediation as viable alternatives to conventional remediation are explained and addressed. So, in bioremediation, may two types din siya, just like aerobics and anaerobics, diba? Then, dito naman is EXC2 and C2 bio are the two types of remediation C2 bioremediation in the in-place treatment of contaminant sites. So firstly, for EX site or off-site. So off-site, normally, yan yung mga external or labas ng park natin. So it means that the conservation of components of biological diversity outside their natural habitat. So the main objective of EXC2 techniques is to support conservation by ensuring the survival of threatened species and the maintenance of associated genetic diversity. So to get to more details, while EXC2 biodigestion is the above ground treatment of contaminated soils or water that is removed from a contaminated site. So parang yan yung, ito yung surface, yun yung, siya yung apart part, siya yung parang yung mga layer part natin, siya yung nag-protect or siya yung function doon na mas importante. And yun na sa loob naman is in situ conservation. And yung purpose na is to aid species recovery and reintroduction. The main techniques are gene bank, seed bank, sperms, and ovary bank, captive breeding of animals, and artificial propagation of plants, and collection of living organisms for zoos, aquaria, and botanic gardens for research and public awareness. So, as we know, in our generation, there's actually a lot of problems about the extinction of animals, plants, and many other things. So, as our generation, we have learned that these kinds of natural na gamit dapat hindi sila mawawala. And how we going to save this is that we need to get their samples, preserve it, study it, and think of a ways to shift them into a new environment and test that test them if they could function just like they were there before. Parang replacement siya. And that's in situ. Yan yung part ni in situ. And ex situ naman, yan yung part na parang ialamin niya sa taas ba is sa top layer ba is mag-grow ba yung tree, mag-survive ba yung animal, parang ganyan yung parang environment, yan yung surrounding. Ito in situ is yun yung core. So the last one in biological treatment will be the biofilters. So this is the action of bacteria in the tank breaking down dangerous ammonia, converting them to nitrates, and then in nitrates to the less toxic nitrates. So enable bacterial colonies to propagate and break down waste. So actually, ito is one of the key components in the filtration portion of a recirculating aquaculture systems or RS. The biofilter houses the nitrifying bacteria and is the primary site where biological nitrification occurs. Nitrifying bacteria process dissolved nitrogenous waste products exerted by the aquatic organism being cultured. So, yan yung parang part ng nitrogen cycle where we convert aluminum to nitrite and nitrite to nitrate as well. Then after ng nitrate, babalik siya sa taas. So parang for this, all cultured organisms, vertebrates or invertebrates, green fish or fish produce waste as a result of the nutrition they receive. So what they receive is actually this naman. From this, nitrates can be harmful to many invertebrates in high concentrations. For us din naman, actually, kahit hindi lang sa mga animals, sa atin din naman, malaking function yan. So the process of biological filtration, also known as the nitrogen cycle, just what I said, the nitrogen cycle involves in the movement of harmful waste through the filter. So ano naman important na nitrogen cycle sa biological treatment? Next slide is this is an aerobic process that needs oxygen to occur. The bacteria that converts ammonia to nitrate are also known collectively by the genus name Nitrosomonas. So these bacteria metabolize and oxidize the nitrates NO2 produced by Nitrosomonas and convert it to nitrate. So yan yung part ng nitrogen cycle. Then afterward, oxygen is also consumed in the creation of nitrate. Nitrate is the end product of the conversion of ammonia and nitrate and is non-toxic at the level usually found in the RS. Um, RS. So basically, um, in part dito is like they are trying converting those waste na nitrogen in nitrogen cycle, then adding oxygen into it, then converting them into a less toxic na pwede naman yung mga invertebrate na animal in the previous slide na mag-live well in their in their environment and won't feel na mahihirapan sila. So that's the last biological treatment ways.
So now I will be discussing about chemical treatments for hazardous waste. Chemical treatment is another way in treating hazardous waste. Chemical treatment can turn those hazardous waste into less harmful materials, and it can also be used to recover valuable byproducts from those waste, making the disposal of those waste to be disposed with less cost. So here are the types of chemical treatments that are available today based on my research. The ion exchange method, the reduction and oxidation treatment, the neutralization treatment, and lastly, the chemical precipitation treatment. So this is the first type of treatment, which is the ion exchange method. Um, Ion exchange is the swapping of ions from one solution to another functional group. Uh, Basically, it is using the opposite type of ion, which is either positively charged or negatively charged, that is present on the hazardous liquid waste, so that those ions would attract each other, since we all know that ions are oppositely attracted to one another. The attraction between those ions are then used to remove the dissolved ionic contaminants which are present in the liquid waste. The swapping process uses a solid, which is either a resin or a zeolite, and a liquid like water. And then the exchange process starts, and the less desired compounds are swapped for those that are desired. Thus, the desirable ions will be placed in the resin material, and the less desired ones will be left in the waste. This is the next type of chemical treatment, which is called the reduction and oxidation treatment, or also known as redox. What redox do is it chemically convert the hazardous waste into less hazardous materials. One compound will be oxidized, meaning it will lose electrons, and another will be reduced, meaning it will gain electrons. Redox works by swapping electrons with contaminants. This exchanging process of electrons converts a lot of the contaminants into harmless components. Electrons are transferred between molecules, and then new elements are created. The common oxidizing compounds used for treatment are ozone, hydrogen peroxide, hypochlorite, chlorine, and chlorine dioxide. And then the common reducing compounds used are ferrous sulfate, sodium bisulfite, and sodium hydrosulfite. Redox is usually used in treating contaminants that are in wastewater systems. The next type of chemical treatment is called neutralization. Neutralization is used to balance the acidity and alkalinity in wastewater. Basically, it is the adjustment of the pH levels in the wastewater until the desired pH is achieved. It is done by adding chemicals directly to the wastewater. The equipments required consist of a storage and reaction tank, a dosage, and a mixing installation. The most important objective of neutralization is to treat the wastewater using biological purification and making it achieve the required pH level. Neutralization is also used for conditioning or stabilizing raw wastewater, emulsion breaking, precipitation reactions, and checking chemical reaction speeds. So this is the last type of chemical treatment. It is called chemical precipitation. Um, Chemical precipitation, it is used to remove dissolved metals that are present in liquid waste. An acid or base is added to a solution to adjust the pH level until it reaches to a point where the constituents that is wanted to be removed will reach their lowest solubility. The solubility of metals is inversely proportional to its pH level, and the metal ions would precipitate out of the solution as hydroxide. The, the residuals of chemical precipitation is a metal sludge or treated effluent with an elevated pH level or sulfide precipitation. Chemical precipitations is used to treat liquid waste that contains metals, and the sludge that results from chemical precipitation may be hazardous. Chemical precipitation is useful in treating hazardous waste, but laboratory jar tests are required to verify the treatment.
The third treatment is land disposal. So, what is land disposal? Land disposal is an alternative means of waste disposal, wherein toxic constituents of hazardous industrial wastes are incorporated into a soil surface layer to enhance their absorption and chemical or biological degradation. One of the examples of land disposal that we're familiar is the Smoky Mountain, located near the port of Manila, and that's all. So there are also rules in land disposal. In 1984, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act prevents the disposal of hazardous waste on land. So why do they prevent the disposal of hazardous waste on land? Because uh, the simplest effect of land disposal is land pollution. And it takes the land out of circulation. Why? The more land we use as land disposal, the less we have remaining. And it is certainly a concern where productive agricultural land is concerned. Why? Kasi instead of that land can be used as agricultural land, they are using it as a land disposal. And we know that kapag meron silang pinpoint na isang location na for land disposal, it is not a small area. They need a large area like hectares of land para lang sa land disposal. So, and especially as the world's population is increasing, we need healthy lands. And the problem comes when contaminated land is returned to use. As I know, after ng land disposal, gamitin doon, I think may iba na parang nire-reuse yung land na yon for some buildings or some recreational things. And there are also restrictions in land disposal, the LDR, land disposal restrictions. It mandates that certain protective measures may be taken before any hazardous waste is disposed. Prevention of pollution of groundwater, usually through leaching of hazardous contaminants into water supplies. So there are three main sections of LDR. These are the disposal, dilution, and storage. First is the disposal, prohibition. Waste-specific treatment standards must be met before disposal of the wasteland. After this slide, we'll discuss about the treatment standards and the dilution prohibition. Waste are treated properly and not merely diluted by adding bulk amounts of either soil, water, or non-hazardous waste in an attempt to dull the concentration of hazardous constituents. Meaning, it is not allowed na i-dilute yung isang waste. For example, parang there's this waste, then they will add a large amount of soil para lang hindi mapansin or hindi mahalata na there hazardous waste below. Kaso, we're not talking about a simple waste. We're talking about an hazardous waste wherein it can cause illnesses to our health, to us. So that is the part of dilution. And the storage prohibition, meaning hazardous waste cannot be stored indefinitely. It may be stored in containers, tanks, containment buildings as long as they meet disposal restrictions, meaning they cannot be stored indefinitely sa mga open areas. They must be stored in some containers and tanks para para safe siya, hindi siya ganun kadaling maka-affect ng environment. Naka-contain siya sa isang place or sa isang storage. So, the treatment standards, land disposal must meet all applicable treatment standards prior to land disposal. So this is the chart. Now we're in, andito yung waste code, waste description. Madami pang waste codes, pero hindi enough yung time to discuss all the waste codes. Pero hindi naman siguro natin need yung waste codes kasi we're talking about the treatment only. So the first column, the waste code, it assists the waste handler in locating all the EPA hazardous waste applicable to the waste. So yun, ito yung nakadetermine kung anong type, kung anong waste code ng waste na yun. Then the second column, the waste description and treatment regulatory subcategory, describes the waste in more detail. So dito natin malalaman kung ano talaga yung talaga yung description ng waste na yon. Kasi meron sasabihin nila that waste is toxic, ganon. Pero in this column, parang more broad yung description niya. So, for listed hazardous waste, the column describes the listed waste. For characteristic waste, the description specifies either ignitability, corrosivity, or reactivity, or the toxicity characteristics. So, for the third column, the regulated hazardous constituent lists the specific regulated hazardous constituents that must be treated. So, and dito nakalagay kung ano yung mga chemical na dapat i-treat within the waste. So, this determination can be made either by performing chemical analysis of the waste. So, it must be documented all the time. So, kailangan documented daw yung mga nasa column 3. So, in the fourth and fifth column, Uh, it differ depending on their waste, if it is a wastewater or non-wastewater form. Waste handlers must determine the category in which their waste best fits to determine the appropriate treatment standard at the point of waste generation. So, so yun yung mga sa treatment standard to determine. And these are the three special treatment requirements for characteristic wastes: the ignitable wastes, the corrosive waste, and the reactive wastes. So first, the ignitable wastes. Non-waste waters must be treated either by combustion, recovery, or organic or polymerization. So wastewaters can be treated in one of three ways: removal of characteristic by the activation and treatment of any UHC to the UTS, combustion, recovery of organics. So UTS means Universal Treatment Standard, and UHC means underlying hazardous constituents. So for corrosive wastes, it is divided in two subcategories. The first one is the most corrosive category. Requires removal of characteristics by the activation and treatment of UHCs to meet the UTS. The second subcategory is the high-level radioactive waste, meaning uh, the waste must be treated by high-level radioactive waste vitrification. So the last type is the reactive wastes, must be treated by the activation and treatment and other explosive devices which have been the subject of an emergency response. The activation is the only treatment required. So, so that's all for the land disposal and for our report. Thank you.